Hi. So I want to continue from the last video. And this time, I think I'm going to focus on the topic of birds, which are another prevalent symbol in this game. Now, not only are they a prevalent symbol in this game, but the writer of this game, Benoit Sokal, has done many other works that involve birds. I mean, one of his famous comic books was a sort of a bird detective was the main character. He's done another comic book recently called Kra, which also features a giant bird. And in the previous part, I was discussing this possibility that each stage of the game is like a more a more sort of like distilled version of the previous one. So almost like the game is following an alchemical process, so that Valadillen is like the initial stage, but then you kind of you remove a layer off Valadillen and you acquire the university, and then you get a layer off that and you get the factory, and they all are organized in very similar ways, and they all seem to be the same place, but just almost as if Kate Walker is seeing deeper into the reality of her situation, and the reality of her situation gets represented with less and less with less sort of like sugary coating, like she's sort of diving deeper into the issue. And one thing that makes me think this is that each different stage kind of feature similar themes, one of them being birds. For example, in Valadillen, the factory in Valadillen has this giant mechanical bird which helps you make the legs for Oscar. But I'd also like to mention how in all the different stages, Hans Vorarlberg he's left a very deep impression, a very deep mark on all three places. In the university, he's really well known. In the factory, he's really well known. Almost as if he'd been there all his life. The people there just talk about him as if they've known him all their lives, and almost as if he is the creator of these places, the most important person of these places. Which makes me think that symbolically it's almost as if Hans Vorarlberg is in these three places at the same time, because they are the same place. And then the encounter between Kate Walker and Hans Vorarlberg at the end is very interesting too, precisely because he suddenly, well, for several reasons, I guess. There's something interesting about this ending, because suddenly Hans Vorarlberg appears to you as this frail old man, and of course throughout the story you've seen him as this sort of heroic figure. But at the end, even the way it's positioned, right, Kate Walker is sort of looking down towards him. He's very tiny and he's sitting down. But there's still like this air as if Kate Walker has found her own father, or sort of like an much older brother or something like that. There's a sort of temporal displacement thing between Anna Vorarlberg and Kate. Kate is sort of fulfilling Anna Vorarlberg's wish of finding her brother. Uh, but okay, so there's several things that come up here, and I'm not sure how to connect them yet. But one is, okay, so first of all, this all happens in like the spa, which is essentially, symbolically, you could say it's a fountain, right? It's a giant fountain. It's also right next to the sea, but it's cold. And there are ships, like shipwrecked or broken ships all around, as if this is the end of the journey, right? The ships have reached the land, and there's no more water. But of course, this is where Kate's journey begins. In a sense, this is where she abandons her old life and goes on a journey with Hans Vorarlberg. So this all happens next to the fountain, here decorated with a clock, so time, and the symbol that decorates this spa all along is this seahorse symbol. So this sort of towering seahorse in the fountain. Okay, so let's keep that in mind. The reason I find that relevant slightly is because in the university, when Anna needs to cross the wall, she gets in touch with this guy. And here, a slightly sort of comical, quirky kind of scene happens, very like a play almost, or like a dream, because this is clearly, this is one of the moments where the game is clearly fantasy, where there's this guy who's guarding from enemies, but the enemy turns out to be a piece of wood. Now, he thought this piece of wood was a horse. That's why I'm connecting it to the seahorse, because the horse as a symbol is, on the one hand, phallus. It's a sort of classic symbol of phallus, which has appeared in this game a lot. And also vehicle. The horse is vehicle, right? It's the spiritual vehicle. The winged horse of Hercules, or the horse of Jesus, or different sort of like heroic figures have a horse as almost like a spiritual vehicle for them. And considering this game has a lot to do with vehicles, right? The train, the boats, all that I was discussing. It's as if I find it interesting that the horse appears both as a seahorse in the middle of the fountain and as a horse, as a real horse here, which ironically is not. Okay, so that's the thing. It's not a real horse. It's a piece of wood. But this guy didn't see, he doesn't see well. He has eyesight problems. So he thinks it's a horse, but actually it's a log. It's a tree. Another sort of phallic symbol in a sense. So he confuses the two. And here a lot of interesting things are happening, because he confuses them. So he confuses them because he doesn't see, but he also confuses them because he's afraid of being attacked. So the topic of projection, which I've discussed in the previous parts, is clear here. He's afraid of being attacked. It's as if this barrier, the barrier connecting the university from the factory, and the factory, if the game, according to Benoit Socal, kind of has something to do with European history, then the factory seems to represent war, and probably World War Two. Um, but I think it's more general than that. I think it represents war in general, in a universal sense. But this is the barrier between the university and war. And there's a fear of being attacked, that if you were to cross this wall, enemies would come in. But it's an unfounded fear, because he is just projecting his fear onto this piece of wood and seeing it as a horse, as a soldier. So, Kate Walker is sort of seeing a sort of, I don't know what, some sort of parental figure in Hans Vorarlberg. Uh, mm, Hans Vorarlberg is seeing a sort of mythological salvation in the symbol of the mammoth. There's a lot of projection going on, but here the projection has to do with fear, and it specifically has to do with ego, in a sense. I mean, it really clearly represents this. This is a barrier. It's literally a wall of ego, creating a strong barrier, an unnecessary barrier, between oneself and the projection of one's shadow or one's fears. And Kate is here to help dissolve this barrier, to help cross this barrier. Now, how does she do this? She gives him a glass of wine which has powdered like mushroom in it. Like this is a specifically weird bit in this game where it ties in back to the bird, the symbol of the bird. Okay, so let's go there for a second. University. You reach the university by this this station, right? And this station is full of birds. That's its distinctive feature. Almost sort of like unrealistically full of birds. It's a very, very strange place. And in the back garden of this station is a little garden where a special kind of grape is grown. And the teachers of the university are secretly making wine for themselves, are making intoxicants for themselves. Now, this university, though, has a dual association to intoxicants, because in the library of the university, Kate finds out that the tribe. I'm afraid I can't remember this very well because I played it a while ago, but essentially there are these two places. There are like these two poles in the universe of this game. There's the Amazon, spelt with an R, like Amazon. So it's clearly like a mythological interpretation of the jungle. And then there's Syberia, this mythological interpretation of Syberia, but generally of sort of like cold, icy place. So there's hot, tropical place, cold, icy place. And both have these sort of, there's this anthropological research about these places in the university. And the Amazon has I should have researched this a little more. I can't remember if it's the Amazon or if it's Syberia, but one of the two places use mushrooms to improve their eyesight. And generally as a magical kind of food. So obviously, even though the game is not 100% clear about this, we're obviously talking about psychedelic mushrooms. They don't use that word, and they, I think, specifically like almost try to talk about it as if it was some other kind of mushroom, but it's clearly psychedelics. And we know this specifically because in low doses, psychedelic mushrooms improve visual acuity. So in low doses, this mushroom helps you see better. Now, at the same time, this seems to be used in a symbolic sense in the game because Kate Walker gives the Guardian mushrooms so that he sees better, as in he opens his eyes, like symbolically. He opens his eyes to his own projection and sees it as a projection. So the barrier falls down. He saw it as a horse, now he sees it as a piece of wood. And this is specifically what is happening to Kate Walker. First she sees Valadillen, then she opens her eyes and she sees the university. Then she opens her eyes again and she sees the war. But then she opens her eyes again and she ends up at the fountain, which at a first glance seems like classical. Also, it's like a circular place, right? It's a circular spa, and it's associated to old age because it's where old people go to relax. The opera singer is there to relax. So it's almost like it's associated with death and the end of a journey. Like it's very dead. It's a very dead place, but at the same time, because it has to do with time and death and aging, it's almost like the fountain of life. Ironically, it's like she's reached the center of the world, and from there she can start her journey towards Syberia. I haven't played Syberia 2, so I'm not sure what happens afterwards, but I will play it soon, hopefully. In any case, so we have, yeah, Kate is sort of the mushrooms, right? She gives the mushrooms to the Guardian and he sees better. In my opinion, we're talking about psychedelic mushrooms. So interestingly enough, that this ties it really nicely with the whole symbol of the mammoth and the archaic revival, because it's as if Kate is going back in time towards World War II in order to confront a certain horror that has been kept back in the past. Like she's retracing memory. But Hans does this at a big level towards the archaic past. So it's very interesting because this ties in so nicely with Terence McKenna and the idea of psychedelic mushrooms being associated to the archaic revival, or the bringing back of the archaic back into consciousness. But that's more of a side note, I guess. The birds. We're in a train station and it's full of birds. Okay, so that's one thing. Here are some birds preventing her from ascending the ladder. Once she reaches up the ladder, not sure where this will be. Okay. Right, so here we have it. A mechanical bird. This is the same as that mechanical bird in Valadillen, in the factory. The bird that helps you make a foot for Oscar. And let's remember, the foot for Oscar is a piece of wood, which is the same thing which the Guardian confuses for a horse. The piece of wood is the attacking enemy, which is represented as the phallus in a, I mean, it's a tricky topic, but I think we're talking here about it's the realm of symbol, and symbols sort of appear and disappear in different ways depending on how Kate Walker is descending into the unconscious as she moves on. But there definitely seems to be a thing here about Kate Walker facing male authority, and male authority seeing the ridiculousness of its position and allowing its barriers to crumble. And then you ascend and move on and move on. This, of course, reaches its climax with the opera singer, Helena, because she ends up being trapped. Okay, so we're at... she ends up being trapped by the crazy factory guy. Yeah, see? She's trapped in this giant prison. Okay, so this is the craziest part of the game. At least, like, not specifically this, but just the factory and the whole story with Helena really amazed me by how, I don't know, I just find this is a very interesting game. I wish I remembered the names of the guys, but anyway, the crazy guy who traps Helena in this cage. Before trapping her in the cage, before literally trapping her in the cage, she has trapped her symbolically in his little like shrine. Oops. Okay, excuse me. Damn it. Anyway, he's built this like shrine for Helena, and it's filled with like mannequins and old photographs of her. Okay, this. Okay, here we are. Yeah, this is really creepy. So, it's hard to know where to start with this. This part of the game, to me, is almost like the epicenter. It's like, to reference another piece of media, this is very like a David Lynch movie, or like Twin Peaks, or sort of where there's this center of the trauma, represented also ironically as a red room, or in The Shining as sort of room 237, or the sort of, there's this way in stories sometimes of representing the epicenter of trauma as a physical place, and this to me seems like it, because here I think Kate Walker is confronting something about herself, not just about Helena. This is a symbolic sort of situation. At this stage in the game, she is finding out that her fiancé is cheating on her with her best friend. She's finding out that her fiancé is only interested in money and social status, that her job sucks. Like, she's just sort of having all these realizations of how she's being, how she sort of finds herself in a life that is not her own. It's the life of someone else. She has had projections put onto her. And I think this is the scary realization. She realizes that she's sort of woken up from being imprisoned by other people's projections. And I think this is represented by this room where the crazy factory guy, and let's remember, this is a factory just like the Valadilen factory, which is a factory of robots, automatons, or in other words, mannequins, right? Unreal people, projected people, photographs, pictures, old recordings, and and here I think is where this realization is starting to be done. And if we were to follow the alchemical kind of bent that this game is taking, it's as if we're sort of advancing through different levels of like distillation or something, where this is a more purified point of Kate Walker's psyche. Purified, you know, not necessarily in the positive sense. Like, this is if there's Valadilene, the university, the factory, and this is like the center of it all. This is what you could say that this is Valadilene, but this is Valadilene once she's opened her eyes, and it doesn't necessarily mean that all of it was a lie, or that the reality of things is negative. It's just that she has gone down into the wound. Once you come out of the wound, then you're back in Valadilene, then things are nice again, but doubly so. They're doubly nice because you've gotten rid of the wound. You've healed the wound. It's the heroic journey, right? You start off in this place, and usually the hero just starts off in a normal town, but you descend into the underworld, represented by this, and then you return back to the town, you return back to Valadilene, or you return back to wherever it was. So it's the same place, but it's completely different because now the wound of the underworld has been healed. And now you're seeing Valadilene as yourself. You're living true to your own will. So yeah, I think this is like a really important part of the game. And of course here we see that the what's trapped are mannequins, right? But later on, Helena herself ends up being trapped in the prison. She sings and the prison descends on her. And it's almost like it's a bird cage, right? And she's singing like a bird singing, but the cage descends on her. And I think that the cage is the Red Room. The Red Room with the mannequins is the same as this room, but once again in a sort of like distilled sort of way. This is an even more purified version of that room, and even more viscerally real. And as Kate walks towards there, opens the door, and helps Helena escape, she is performing a very important symbolic action in her own psyche, because she is freeing herself by freeing Helena. But she had to reach the center of hell in order to be able to do that, in order for the symbolic act to be effective. So, birds. I want to go back to the theme of birds. Oh, this is interesting too. The astronauts' chamber is another sort of weird room full of portraits of the past. It's sort of a lot of the rooms in this game are very resonant of each other. Okay, well, since we're here, I might just look at this then. Oops. Okay, yeah. So, let's look at this scene. Okay, so, oops. Mm, once again, what do we have here? It's a station. It's not a train station, but it's a space station filled with birds. So it's the same place symbolically than the university station. It's a station filled with birds. And once again, the factory has a robotic bird. The station has a robotic bird. Here there is a real bird, a real eagle, which descends to help scare the birds and help the vehicle be usable, the air balloon. So it helps you move forward. Like the first bird gives you legs to move forward and so on. Now, I think it's interesting that we have these stations. Stations are places, again, for movement, travel, and therefore time, moving through time, which is what's happening in this game. You're revisiting the Cold War. You're revisiting World War II. Helena, the opera singer, is revisiting her own past. All her life as a big star, which has now passed. So there's this sort of going back into the past, and these places of transition are filled with birds. Which could classically be sort of, I don't know, spirit, right? Spiritual. There's a lot of energy in these places, or messengers. I'm not sure how I would interpret them in the context of this game, apart from them, they're on a sort of high level. They're not on the ground. So, just on a very sort of rudimentary sense, the way this game goes from the train to the hot air balloon to the spaceship, it's ascending. There's an ascent. And again, as I said in another video, there's an ascent in the sense that you're moving like towards Syberia. So you're going up towards the north, which is an ascent as well. So symbolically, all these things represent like the top of, like, in a sense, it could represent the top of the body. So energy is ascending up towards the crown chakra. That's one possible interpretation. Maybe a less embodied sense would be just an ascent, spiritually in general, just like individuation, psychological individuation, and but yeah, in any case, I think it's relevant that this is a station filled with birds and the other place is also a station filled with birds. I think that's important. And the fact that this bird is real, this eagle was real, in the same way that first you see a mannequin of Helena, but then Helena herself is trapped. The projections, it's the story of Pinocchio, right? First you have the wooden boy, but then you have Hans Vorarlberg. The wooden creations, the wooden projections become real people. They become their own selves. Kate Walker was a wooden person, but discovers that that's not who she wants to be, and that's not who she is deep inside, and becomes herself. She becomes a real person. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, there are other things I'd like to mention about this game, but I can't really think of them at the moment. Oh yeah, right. When you enter this place, so if I said that the spa is Sorry for skipping so fast. If the spa is the fountain, then you enter it by blocking the fountain, right? You put soap in the fountain. That's what allows you to enter. You're sort of cleaning the fountain, something like that. Again, the seahorses everywhere. You're like in the center of the seahorses. This is an interesting theme. I've noticed this in other media, in other movies, and this is not the appropriate place to touch on it, but I think that this theme of the center of the world being very associated to the symbol of the horse is something to keep an eye out for, because I think it's a theme I've noticed more than once. So I think it has some archetypal potency that makes it appear again and again. There is one last thing I wanted to mention, but I have no idea where I would even find it. You receive a call from your fiance, and he starts telling you,
fantastic cocktail, and only he knew the ingredients. I add
Quite a while ago. What was it about?
barman at the Maritz.
George, you mean Mr. George?
Uh,
Hello, hotel. Hello, hotel bar.
hi. I barman at the
No.
Maritz in the 5th.
yeah, these two guys, these two guys I think are relevant. Surprisingly so. I think these two guys are relevant. But I'm not sure how to describe it. They're playing chess, so it's this sort of yin-yang thing. You're in like the center of the yin-yang. But more specifically, there are several incidents that happen in this spa where like someone drops a glass of champagne, I think, and then these two guys are playing and this stuff, and then you get this phone call from your fiance, and he starts telling you about this party you went to the other day in high society, and how someone dropped a drink, or someone like dropped a jar onto the floor, and then these other two guys were playing this other game. And it made me think, wow, that's very specific and accurate to what you are living here in the spa. You're living like a different symbolic incarnation of what your fiancé is telling you was this high society party. And let's remember that Kate Walker's mum is dating an opera singer who used to date Helena, the opera singer. So Helena and Kate Walker's mother get slightly associated, and high society, of course, gets sort of slightly mixed into the thing. This contrast between like small mountain town and big city multinational company, big money, small town. It's as if at this point of the game, Dan, I think it was her fiance is Dan, tells her this story, and Kate sees this story reflected in her environment. She sees the two guys playing, she sees the glass fall down. And it made me think that another way to interpret this game is a more like, I don't know what you'd call it, like a sort of Stanley Kubrick movie thing or something, where you could interpret it that Kate Walker is in New York all the time. But we are seeing a dreamlike representation of what is going through Kate Walker's heart as she lives through this period of rupture between her life, between her past and her future. And that this sort of rupture from who she used to be and who she is becoming is represented in this big journey, in this fantasy land, but that actually she is at the party. She saw what her fiancé is talking about and is here representing it in the dream. I think it's interesting. I don't like that interpretation too much because I prefer saying that this is real, that this story is real, instead of saying that it was a dream. I think it's more interesting. I think but no matter what, the symbolic charge of this story it still is there, regardless of how you decide to place the reality or the ontological state of this adventure. I think that the meaning is there.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Hook.
And they're talking about moving the queen as well, which kind of could do almost like how the crazy guy in the factory is placing Helena in this specific part of his plan. He has a plan, and the opera singer fits in his projection of the plan, as if she were like just, again, a mannequin, a wooden piece in his game. Which I think is how Kate Walker feels in her situation. It's a very holy place, isn't it? Also, it's like a sanctuary. It's like a church, not like she's reached an ancient ruin, with this sort of like statues of goddesses and the horses, and yet at the same time it's surrounded by sunken boats. Oh well, I'm not sure what else to talk about, but I might make another video about this series. I'm not sure. I would like to play Syberia 2 soon enough and see what that is all about. In any case, thank you very much for listening, and yeah, see you.